and welcome to our second Diversity Roundtable discussion. It's really interesting to see a panel session that is representative of so many different sectors. So between all of us today, we've got advertising, fashion, TV and broadcast, tech. So it's a stellar lineup. The creative industries contribute over £84 billion a year, and we also offer 1 in 11 jobs, which is huge. So what sort of role can we play together in fostering inclusion and influencing culture, and hence contribute to combating some of the real challenges that we face in our times? And as creative businesses, should we be doing more to impact and influence societal behavior? 2017 is an important year for the IPA because we are in our centenary year and we've just been granted chartered status. So what that means is we're now a professional institute, not a trade association. And we now need to take into account how our work is affecting the public interest and serve the public interest. And that is why the diversity and inclusion agenda is so important for us, and we're really trying to push it on behalf of our 300 plus advertising and Marcoms member agencies. And we also want to galvanize our members to taking measurable steps towards better inclusion and diversity to meet the industry targets that have been set to 2020.
I mean, I guess professionally, Channel 4 is enshrined in our remit. So, you know, it's sort of at the core of what we do. We're here to represent everybody, irrelevant of your colour, your gender, your sexual orientation, and that sort of filters through. And I guess personally, having worked for 5 years at Channel 4, you can't help but be caught in that wave. And as we've developed our sort of diversity and latterly our diversity and inclusion strategy, I think we've seen the ways that we can start to get commercial partners involved in that, and that's probably my particular passion area of how we make both sides of it, editorial and commercial, pull in the same direction.
Personally, I guess for me it was going into an industry where there was a lot of people that didn't look like me when I first kind of got into it, and it was very much a passion, sort of advertising, communications and such like. And so that's kind of gradually, it's almost like the UK population mix has kind of caught up with this particular sector. So it's gradually sort of come higher up the food chain, if you like, in terms of businesses really having to reflect the UK population. Ultimately, there's 3 people in the chain. There's clients, there's practitioners, and there's audiences. And whether you're on content or whether you're looking at paid content on our side, you're always trying to find the audience, and what you need to be able to do is really to be able to tap into that cultural zeitgeist. So and certainly advertising has always been about reflecting culture, and if the culture is out of sync with what the audience is, you're going to have ineffective work. So in a lot of ways it's a business need that's really kind of driving that, but certainly we've tried to put in place processes and strategies that are really going to help us be very open-minded about where we recruit talent from in the future and moving forward.
Yeah, I remember I was really delighted to see you at the IPA when I started out. So I was about a year in.
Yeah.
And it was my first event with young people. I think there were about 100 apprentices, and we had different speakers from across agencies come and talk to them about the different sort of job roles in advertising. And I saw Yusuf and I was like, oh my God, there's actually another person who's South Asian from a similar background, because I hadn't seen anybody else at all.
So I guess personally it's about, I'm a Londoner through and through. I was born here, and I think I've grown up in a very diverse multicultural city, and that is who I am and what I want representative of the world. Professionally, we are with the fashion industry. It is about global access, it is about visibility, it is about diversity, inclusivity. And so I guess this year is about launching positive fashion, which is about helping brands and business to become more diverse, and also to educate our future designers on becoming more diverse.
You know, we've got multiple products that have more than 1 billion users. And so there's only about 70,000 people that work for Google. And so there's a real challenge built into how do you make products that are universally accessible for a global global community. And so being able to embrace those nuances, because people expect to see themselves in the products they use, regardless of whether they even know what they want yet. You know, we've gotten to that point of customization.
Personally, from a personal standpoint, you know, I've sort of come up in a string of environments in which, you know, like you mentioned earlier, I was the only. So, you know, if I saw another woman of color or person of color, it'd usually be sort of like the exception rather than the rule. And so that's kind of been an on and off experience throughout my entire career. And so then here at Elle, you know, it's really been about sort of representing the full breadth of our readership. And then also just working within the fashion world, also just sort of like helping people to sort of understand the importance of really representing the consumer base as well. And so, you know, I grew up, you know, from a really small age reading magazines, and I didn't always see myself represented. And there is an expectation as a consumer to sort of see yourself, whether it's consuming a magazine or looking at a clothing line or that sort of thing. So now from my side of things at Elle, you know, working across all of the fashion features and across the magazine as a whole, it's really about sort of making sure that we're really representing the full scope of womanhood and what that means and how that looks.
So now I'm going to try and get you guys to talk a little bit more in detail about the work that you're doing. So Matt, quite a few of Channel 4's really big moments have been centered around diversity, and it's seen intrinsically to be absolutely at the heart of your business. So perhaps talk us a little bit through your diversity journey, and also a little bit more about sort of things that you've learned along the way that other people, other businesses, especially in Adland, might want to pick up on.
So probably really powered up 2 years ago. So we launched in 2015 our 360 Diversity Charter, which is where we made some pretty serious commitments across all the key areas of diversity. And as I said, it was very much about diversity, but I think if we were doing that now, it would absolutely be a diversity and inclusion strategy. Yeah. And I think that was challenging us on two levels, really. We call it our own backyard, so that's the 850 people that work for Channel 4, so how we create the right culture. We absolutely believe that if we have the most diverse group of people working for us, not only will we create better ideas, but actually you can't expect those people to make programs. You know, people naturally have their own biases. We will have our own biases. And so that's been a big part for us, and we've seen some quite staggering changes in that about getting people to be honest with us, and that's a big journey, and that's the first hurdle you've got to overcome. Yeah. And I think the second part was really what we can do on screen. So you know, that whole point around representing your audience is exactly what we're about. You know, how can you claim to try and drive diversity and inclusion if your shows aren't reflecting that? And so last year it sort of built because of the Paralympics. So naturally in a year of Paralympics we were able to power that up. We made that our year of disability, and we focused all of our energy around that. And I guess the commercial piece is interesting, isn't it? Because most of our best work has been done editorially on screen. We launched our Superhumans Wanted competition, and we basically gave away £1 million and said, okay, we'll de-risk it for you. We'll put the airtime on the table, and we'll give that to the brand that comes up with the best idea. And I think that was a big part of us. So we've been playing catch up, I think, commercially, and now we've recalibrated our 360-degree charter, and we've now got 4 frontiers, and we're sort of now thinking about where do we go next year.
Yeah. And the commitment from leadership is really key to this all happening.
Yeah, our experience is if you don't have board-level exec sponsorship of these initiatives, it won't happen. So probably the big lessons for us are you've got to have somebody to be your sponsor, somebody to twist the arm of the finance director, because that's the other thing. If you can do this properly, it's going to cost you money, not just in pure cash, but also in time and effort. And
do you do sort of surveys internally, diversity surveys with your staff as well?
Yeah, you've got to know your baseline. So if you don't know, you know, if you're trying to drive diversity and inclusion in your staff, well, then the first thing you've got to know is where are you now? And that's the biggest challenge we have.
So last year you focused on disabilities, and obviously you guys have, as Channel 4 with the Paralympics, you're kind of synonymous with that area. Are you focusing on a separate strand of diversity this year?
Yeah. So yeah, disability was an easy decision for us last year. You know, if you go home tonight and you haven't got something better to do, go enjoy the sunshine, and you watch television, the first thing you're going to see is there aren't loads of ads with people with visible disabilities in them. So I would say that we certainly haven't changed the world with one big £1 million initiative. I think we've certainly challenged a few opinions. So when we came to think about this year's project, firstly we decided to rebrand it, so it's now the Channel 4 Diversity and Advertising Award, so it gives us flexibility to be able to, next year if we decide to do social mobility or we want to focus on LGBT, we can do that.
Yeah.
But this year we've decided to focus on non-visible disability. Because what we've found in our journey over the last year is that actually most of the movement in our disability stats internally were not driven by people disclosing visible disabilities, it was people having the confidence to share that they've had, a mental health issue or they've got other sorts of non-visible disabilities. And so we've set a very tough challenge this year to the advertising industry, which is enter a campaign that promotes non-visible disability.
We've naturally gravitated towards people that don't look like us. Part of it has been the fact that I'm on the senior team anyway, so it's a natural way of thinking rather than we must fulfill a quota or we must be doing this. But as I said at the start, it's also very much a commercial need that an agency is only reflecting a client's brief, and it's our responsibility to be able to reflect their audiences, if they want to be able to produce work that resonates and connects and helps them achieve their business objectives. But the catalyst certainly 5 or 6 years ago around investing in graduate and youth talent was really been driven by technology. So the very medium and the very environments that we kind of are placing ad content means that we needed people that really understood that as a natural environment to be able to produce their work. And so as a consequence of that, we found that people were coming from very diverse backgrounds. So we've been involved in the IPA Creative Pioneers way back. We've then set up things like summer school, so to give people a sort of a taster of what the industry is about. This autumn we're going to be involved in Advertising Unlocked, which is really about opening the doors to people that wouldn't normally consider this industry.
If you look at kind of representative on the catwalk and also in our designer showrooms, then we're at about 30% that are non-British. But certainly I think the world is changing and our industry has always been pretty diverse, and certainly, as I said, London is our heart. We are London Fashion Week. And we are working with some really interesting people like Adoa, who represents Girls Talk and sort of encourages women to speak out on kind of mental health issues and diversity. We work with Kenya at Elle, and it's about, I guess, as a body, bringing together all these different people across the industry to try and not only encourage change but also shine a light on the positive news stories and the positive things that are happening. In terms of the education piece and our scholarships, that also means tested to ensure that people from all different walks of life and backgrounds are sort of encouraged in the same way to come on board and be a part of the industry. And I definitely say also in the colleges around, we've got the top sort of fashion colleges in the world, and a lot of those are extremely diverse in terms of international students.
Jack, Google's obviously one of the sexiest businesses in the world. Everyone wants to work at Google. Is obviously absolutely at the heart of the digital revolution. What for you are the big challenges as such a huge employer working across different markets?
One is definitely the future of work. There are not enough people going into technology, and I think there's a lot of our industries that are struggling within that. And so, since the beginning of 2015, we've gone through and connected with more than 2 million European children around getting them excited for what technology can look like and how do we shape what learning looks like for kids, and also parents to understand what's going on. Only about half of the British households are prepared for the digital revolution. We are one of the first technology firms to release our data and kind of point out the challenges and the problems we have. To your earlier point, if you don't talk about it, you're unlikely to do anything about it. We've made some great progress. There was a UK Business Week article today talking about Google's senior leadership team and our gender and ethnicity split. I'm really proud of that progress. If I look at the non-tech side, we've made some huge strides. We're about, in the sales side, about 46, 47% female. I don't think people necessarily think about that when they think about us.
Yeah.
And so there's long and short-term things we've got to do that I think most of us have to do, because things are changing quickly. 65% of degrees in the UK go to women today. Without some interventions, though, I think we're going to see some of the same problems we have.
How sort of ahead of us is the US with regards to the inclusion piece?
I wish I could say that there was some place that had figured this out. The U.S., I grew up, I'm 51 years old, I was born in Jackson, Mississippi in the mid-'60s. Talking about race was a dinner time conversation my entire life. I don't think that's the reality here for most families. And so there are going to be parts of the world where there's a lack of knowledge or language. There's a research project I'm doing with the Chartered Management Institute and the British Academy of Management. And it talks about, for example, about people are scared to have a conversation for fear of being labeled a racist. And how do we go through and equip people to go through and even have these conversations?
Kenya, tell us a little bit more about the work that you've been doing with Elle magazine. What's Elle's take on diversity and inclusion in fashion?
We have a really interesting take. I mean, in the time that I've been at Elle, we've gotten a fair amount of press on the fact that, we've had more women of color on our covers than probably any other women's magazine in London or in our competitive set or that sort of thing. But we have always, as long as I've been there, have taken the approach that if you have a diverse staff, like if you just have, a variety of points of view on your team, then the content will naturally follow. And I started out as a junior, I was writing about diversity and the lack of diversity in publishing and fashion at the time. And I worked for a magazine at the time called Jane that was owned by Condé Nast. And I've seen so much change and progress on that side of the Atlantic in New York. And I think that's because of consistent conversations like this about it. And like you said, it's just it's much more common, I think, to talk about race over there than it is here. But when I go back to New York now for a show season for New York Fashion Week or that sort of thing, it's amazing to see the amount of growth that's taken place since I started to now at this point. And I've been writing about and tracking diversity off and on, throughout my career. When Franca Sottani did the Vogue Black issue at Vogue Italy, I started contributing to her online team shortly afterwards, and then working a lot with the team around the coverage that they were doing online with Vogue Black. And to see the amazing progress that happened out of that and that conversation that she started there. And that was controversial at the time, but it created a dialogue that kept going. So having witnessed a dialogue begin in New York and then another begin in Italy. So I think a lot of it's about promoting those conversations. So at Elle, we've done things we had Harry Neff on our cover. We've had Amanda Stenberg, some really incredible women who have a point of view and a message. And it's been great because we've had an incredible feedback and response from women who might not have necessarily seen themselves in the magazine and maybe say a decade or more ago. They've seen the progress and the growth. So that's been really exciting for us to watch. But yeah, we're really of the mind that if you have a diverse team, then the change will naturally happen. And this is one of the most diverse cities in the world. So there really isn't any reason why the runways and the magazines and the campaigns shouldn't be diverse. So I think London has come a really long way. I mean, London Fashion Week just had its most diverse season ever. So I'm writing a big feature for our August issue on this very topic, and there's an organization that tracks the runways, New York, Paris, Milan, and London had huge growth. It was amazing. And with the magazines as well, the appointment of Edward at Vogue is incredible. So, there's been so much progress.
Tell us a bit about your mentorship program.
So, and again, in New York, when I was coming up as an assistant and a junior and rising up the ranks, I was always just the only one on the staff or that sort of thing. And so I saw the progress that happened in New York, and then I came here and I felt like I wasn't seeing as much diversity as I could within the industry itself, and I wanted to sort of help redress that, help correct that a bit. And A lot of it, I think, is an economic issue because in my field, you have to be able to afford to be poor those first few years, which means you have to have support from home. Your parents have to be able to help supplement your income when you're interning and practically working for free. So that, I think that is a big factor. But I wanted to sort of help kind of fuel some of the progress that I've seen take place in the States and in New York. By encouraging greater representation within the industry that I work in, which is publishing and fashion. So what I started doing is I started with RCA because the head of the fashion department there is a friend of mine, and we've been talking about this very issue. And I have some women who are quite influential in their various places of work who are all women of color. So we would get together for periodic dinners. And, I talked about the fact that it'd be nice to give back. It's fun to have these dinners, but it'd be nice to sort of give back in some way. So I spoke to my friend Zoe at RCA, and she sent some students my way. And so we started with them, and then from there, I started speaking to the London College of Fashion and onboarded students from there. And then I've just begun working with Central St. Martin's, which is great. So they'll begin sending students my way very soon. So we've got a nice little group of students who are all sort of mentoring. So each mentee is assigned a mentor. And then we get together for sort of semi-regular sort of gatherings in which we can answer their questions in a group setting and just sort of give them encouragement. We always really pay attention to like what our readers are interested in online. Like we pay a huge amount of attention to analytics and like who they respond to. So it's about like the message that the celebrity has, her point of view, what she's working on, but it's also about paying attention to what our readers are telling us on social media and online.
Editor. So how do you guys at the BFC feel about that? Do you think it's going to make a difference at all?
Well, I think it's absolutely wonderful. I mean, Edward is, he's been employed for his merit and his talent. He's a creative visionary, not because of the colour of his skin, but equally I think that message is a really solid one.
Yeah. And
it's really positive. So we're absolutely 100% behind him. We're very close to him. And Caroline absolutely supports him and is already sort of having meetings with him to discuss, the future and how we can work together and collaborate. And maybe there is a story there to sort of, start to cement some really interesting discussions around the topic. So we're chairing a lot of roundtables on Brexit because, this movement of trade and industry and individuals coming into the country and in and out is absolutely fundamental to our industry.
Yeah.
We worth 28 billion to the UK economy, and the percentage of people that aren't, originally from the UK is enormous. And so it's about sort of also speaking to government to encourage a positive Brexit in terms of talent and movement of trade and individuals into our country.
Tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing with the UN Women in the UK.
Well, UN Women is one of the newest organizations within the UN, and so it's interesting because there's great brand awareness, but there's not always a level of engagement and understanding of what it means. And so the work is very much divided around promoting gender equality and ending the violence against women. 65% of degrees in the UK go to women today. Without some interventions, though, I think we're going to see some of the same problems we have, and I don't know that we're going to necessarily see it happen organically at the rate we want it to.
And I read your piece about a lady named Fatima Zaman who's doing some incredible work with the Kofi Annan Foundation. So the nature of the content is definitely shifting.
Yes.
So that's really exciting.
We've had Elizabeth Nyamero in the magazine. We've worked with her quite a bit with He for She. So we really try to just work with people who we think are doing incredible things and who we can learn from as well.
And do you think, because celebrities are quite important part of the work that you do and the magazine, do you think having more celebrities who are being more vocal about diversity and certain issues is a good thing?
I think it's a good thing. Again, I think technology has been a huge factor in terms of the progress that we've seen because if the reader doesn't see it, she's going to say it. She has a powerful platform. If she doesn't believe it, if she doesn't buy it, if she doesn't think it's authentic. I think that Pepsi ad this past year that Kendall Jenner starred in was a prime example. Like if the reader doesn't buy it, she's going to let you know it, and it's going to spread quickly and furiously. One thing I forgot to bring up was the issue of cultural appropriation, which tends to come up a lot. It's come up a lot this year as far as campaigns and things like that go. And I think that's just a really easy, foolproof way to avoid that. If you have people in the room who can just raise a hand and say, this doesn't necessarily feel quite right, like, I think that goes a long way.
Just picking on that point, actually, I think social mobility, you know, is that's the next big thing for us.